The October 19th election was painful for many New Democrats in Toronto, especially for those in the riding of Toronto-Danforth that was considered an NDP bastion and home of former leader Jack Layton. Liberal candidate Julie Dabrusin broke the NDP hold on the riding and returned it to the Liberal Party after more than a decade. Member, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
What's life like now being an MP? The House is back and you've got a few sessions under your belt. You're one of the class of 2015. How does it feel?
Feels great. It's been a really wonderful experience, and it's great to have so many people who are new on the Hill as well. There's just a great energy on the Hill right now, and you can feel it walking around that there's a lot of work to be done and a lot of people excited to do it.
So talking about being up with the new class, have you found your way around the schoolyard and being able to get your desk and figure out the different committee assignments and things?
Yeah, no, it's fun. That first day of finding your desk in the House of Commons, it's an amazing experience. There's nothing that can really quite compare to it. And so yes, I've found my desk, and it's a nice little spot which I have, and I'm on 2 committees right now. So I'm on the Special Joint Committee for Physician-Assisted Dying, and I'm on the Heritage Committee.
So let's talk about those 2 committee assignments, because the first one has certainly got a lot of attention and has already started meeting, and I believe that one of the ministers has already been testified in front of it.
Okay, yes, so the Physician-Assisted Dying Committee has finished now hearing oral evidence, in fact. So we have heard 62 witnesses over the past few weeks, and I think we've received something like over 100 documents. So we've been busy at work, but it's been a really interesting experience because it is the first Special Joint Committee in 20 years. So the first Special Joint Committee having senators and members of the House of Commons together. And it's been quite the challenge.
Now the Supreme Court gave you a little bit of extra time, so you're a little bit under the gun in terms of coming up with a report and recommendations that can then be brought forward for legislative action.
Yeah, in fact, we have to report to the House of Commons and Senate by the end of February, basically. So we don't have very much more time. So we have provided instructions to the analysts, and we'll be working on the report over the next couple of weeks. So
that's something we're going to be watching in the weeks ahead.
Yeah.
On the other committee that you're on, Heritage, Canada is celebrating its 150th birthday next year, and that's something that Heritage is going to be front and center.
Yeah, and we have to practice saying sesquicentennial.
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 I am a vintage that I remember sesquicentennial here in the city of Toronto. So I'm fully up to speed on that.
Speed on that one. Yes. No, and the Heritage Committee is going to have, we are going to be meeting in the week when we get back. So in 2 weeks we'll be sitting down again and coming up with what our agenda will be, but certainly Canada 150 is one of the things that we will be looking at.
Now the Liberals during the election talked about investing in heritage and trying to restart something that the previous government decided wasn't a priority.
True. So we've committed to increasing fundings for the CBC and Radio-Canada, and then as well putting more funding into telefilm and into the Canada Council. So there is a lot that we need to look at and to see how we're going to provide extra support to our arts industries, absolutely.
There's been several studies, and I've talked to people, and you look at what happens here in Toronto when we have TIFF, the International Film Festival, and now with the Canadian dollar being lower, more American and foreign productions are setting up in Canada to do movies. The Revenant, which is up for Academy Awards, was filmed primarily in Alberta. There are actually economic dividends by investing in culture.
Yes, it's a huge part of our economy. And in my riding of Toronto-Danforth, we have a tremendous amount of activity in the film industry, television industry, music industry. So we see all the time in the theater industry, lots of people who are employed, and it's a source of employment. It's also a source of what keeps the glue together as a community. When you want to think about what it means to be Canadian, it's one of those great things to have a strong cultural arts community.
And you're no stranger to the community. You've been involved in a number of areas in the schools and dealing with hunger. Tell me a little bit about your background so that people who may not be familiar with you have an idea of your involvement.
Sure. So I practiced law for 13 years, and then I spent a few years with my family and focusing on raising my family at home. During that time, I was able to become a lot more involved and engaged in the local community. So some of the things I did is I founded Friends of Withrow Park, which engaged people in big community space, getting people out to use the community space more. I also worked with the local farmers market to get fresh produce to local food banks. And I started a second harvest squad that picks up food from local businesses along the Danforth and brings it to women who are new to Canada.
Now, a lot of people, when they think about Toronto Danforth, think about the Danforth, famous arterial that divides the city between north and south. But you have a very diverse riding. It's not just that part of it. It extends all the way down to the waterfront.
It does. So, in fact, it goes, it is bordered on three sides really by the Don River. So it goes to the north into the ravine, then to the west into the Don Valley, and then to the south to Lake Ontario and to Coxwell. And there are a multitude of different communities represented there. It's much more than just the Danforth.
So what are the priorities of people in your community? You mentioned that you had pre-budget discussions in the riding. What are people in the community telling you the priorities in Ottawa should be for the coming year or so?
People are very concerned, I would say infrastructure broadly, but if we broke it down, social infrastructure, a lot of discussion about affordable housing. People are very concerned about the availability of affordable housing, social housing, but also rents that are affordable for people as well. People raise a lot of concerns about public transit, wanting to build public transit. And so those were two of the key issues that were raised along the way. But there were a lot of interesting discussions about innovation and creating a better economy for our businesses.
Now, in Ottawa, what are your priorities? What are you going to try and champion for the community as well as your own personal interests?
So I have, one of the reasons I ran was because I was really concerned about the growing income inequality in our country. And one of my personal interests is in food policy and food security. So that is something that I will be certainly working upon, and I'm very happy to see that creating a national food policy is this #2 on the mandate letter for the Minister of Agriculture. So that's something to be working upon. Locally, I'm very concerned about moving the mouth of the Don River so that it's a renaturalized mouth to the Don River and giving the opportunity to regenerate the portlands.
That's certainly a topic that has been raised at City Hall and one that I'm sure is going to be front and center with you being an advocate. In terms of income inequality, which is an area that really hasn't been properly addressed for the past 10 years, I was fascinated to hear that one of the ministers actually talking about a minimum income for Canadians.
Minister Duclos has mentioned something about that as well. And in fact, the Canada Child Benefit creates a guaranteed annual income for children. And that was one of the promises that our government has made as well, is to create a new Canada Child Benefit.
Now, I believe, if I'm correct, one of the first bills that was presented to Parliament after the government took office was a tax cut.
That's true. So, in fact, the first bill was a tax cut for the middle class, which had also been a promise that we had made during the campaign. And that was one of the first things, that was the first thing that we went ahead to do.
And now we've got a budget coming up with Minister Morneau, your next door neighbor, I believe, in Toronto Centre. He's under a lot of pressure. The economy's not doing as well across the country. We see what's happening with the price of oil in Alberta and in Atlantic Canada. Ontario seems to be regenerating itself. It's, the employment numbers have been positive last couple of months. Where do you think the priorities for the budget should focus on?
Well, hearing what people were saying in pre-budget consultations, and I think that's a lot of what I heard at the door as well. We do need to work on our infrastructure. We have crumbling infrastructure in our cities. So affordable housing, making sure that people have a roof over their heads, that's what allows them to be able to thrive. They need to be able to feel like they're secure.
Member, thank you so much for joining us today. I was joined by MP Julie Dabrusin from the riding of Toronto Danforth. We'll be back in a moment with The Point.